Every now and then, it's super important to do a video just for you, and that's what this video is. I'm converting up some Chaos Raptors from the Mark 6 Assault Marine. It's a project I've been really excited to do for a long time, and I'm doing this because I've only got a few days left in Australia before I head to Adepticon, one of the biggest and most exciting trips of my life. So join me in this video as we embark on a bit of my personal hobby, my own little journey with my Chaos Space Marines. It's tabletop time. This video has been graciously sponsored by Tacticus. Let's do it. So to make properly scaled Chaos Raptors, we need a good foundation, and there is nothing better, I think, maybe we'll find out, than the Mark 6 Assault Marines from Horus Heresy. Chaos Marines wear older marks of armor, and they're not Primaris Marines, so using Assault Intercessors is not as ideal a conversion, and these are looking pretty great. I also have Chaos Legionnaires. There might be the odd bit or bob here that I might want to use, but of course the bulk of the extra bits will come from this old Chaos Raptors kit that has been kicking around unpainted in my hobby room for a long time. But the best way of working out how I'm going to do this is honestly to start clipping out bits and just having a look at these models. So the reason for this conversion is I really dislike my models being different scale. The Raptor kit, when it came out, was fantastic. It was the first new Chaos Space Marine kit in such a long time, and it showed a huge amount of new detail that brought them in line with the Dark Vengeance chosen. However, it was also the last Chaos Space Marine kit released at this scale, the classic Space Marine scale. So when the rest of the Chaos range got updated, these Raptors were left in the dust and are quite noticeably smaller than their Chaos brethren. So I've got this box of Raptors sitting here that I have no intention of building at their current scale, but they do look like they'll make some good conversion fodder. The heroic scale of the era means their massive lightning claws and arms will be quite serviceable on some other bodies, as well as their cool helmets. I'm going to be building a Raptor Sergeant and a Warp Talon today to attempt to show off what you can do with some Kitbashers with the modern Horus Heresy kit. And that kit is of course the Mark 6 Assault Marine kit, which will be perfect for my Alpha Legion. Alpha Legion, of course, having a little bit less of that chaosification than the rest of the Chaos factions. This lower key Mark 6 plate will work really well with a few Chaos pieces. I also have a Chaos Legionnaires box kit, just in case I need some extra chainswords or guns or anything else. The first thing I notice is the scale is absolutely perfect. These Mark 6 Marines stand up closely next to the Legionnaires, so I'm going to have no trouble here. The smaller helmets are noticeable on the Mark 6 Marines, but I actually think the chunky Raptor heads look super good in this armor and bring it right in line with the Chaos Space Marines. The torsos and backpacks all assembled together on these Mark 6 Marines, so the first one I'm going to build is going to be a Raptor. So to get this Raptor Sergeant conversion going along, I needed to select some choice pieces from these kits. I picked a Power Axe arm from the Chaos Legionnaires kit, which fit perfectly alongside a plasma pistol that I salvaged from the Chaos Raptors. The helmet is technically a Warp Talon head, but I thought this awesome crest would work really well to make him quite a distinguished sergeant amongst my Raptors, or aspiring champions as Chaos call them. To add a little bit more flair as a sergeant, I went into my Forge World bits and I picked out this shoulder pad from my Headhunters kits. The other shoulder pad I just grabbed from the Legionnaires kit. But one thing I did note during this conversion, as I had built a couple of sort of trial models, was that the old shoulder pads, not only from the Chaos Raptors but also from the old Chaos Space Marines, they all still fit. So you can actually use those old Chaos trimmed shoulders on modern Assault Marines from Horus Heresy or even on the Chaos Legionnaires. With these additions, one thing I absolutely loved from the kit was there are these holsters that don't have guns in them, and this is something that Space Marines haven't really had in any number, but the Assault Marine kit comes with 10. So I made sure to include a pistol holster for his plasma pistol. Even though his plasma pistol looks a bit too big to fit, it doesn't really matter. And with those simple modifications made, I'm really happy with this Alpha Legion Raptor champion. I don't think you need to go too far for Alpha Legion, and that balance of a little bit chaosy is also perfect for me, because I'm planning on being able to use these double duty. So I can use them as Raptors in 40k, or as some late Heresy, quite chaosified Alpha Legion for Siege of Terror campaigns in the Horus Heresy. Pulling double duty with models is a great way to, well, get the most bang for your hobby buck, especially if you're as time poor as I am. So as is to be expected for a modern kit, these Heresy Assault Marines went together an absolute breeze, and it was time for me to start picking out parts to customize them with. Now, we've been asked many times for some general tips around customizing, kit bashing, and converting, so I think this is as good an opportunity as any to share some. It might seem obvious, but having a lot of bits is obviously a great place to start, and I found in my experience one of the best things you can have going for you is a flexibility about your design. It might sound a little bit trite, but it does feel as if you have to let the miniature find itself, let the conversion find itself, because sometimes if you have too specific a vision, the parts that you try and use just don't really go together. When you're trying to use bits from kits separated by sometimes a decade or more, the angles that the arms connect on, the joints, the proportions, all of these things can be quite different. For example, in this conversion, I note that the Raptor heads are very wide and the shoulders of the Heresy Marines are quite narrow, so you're quite limited in the poses and the way you can turn the heads left to right. So you have to think about that when you're positioning those heads. That, of course, then factors in with the arms you choose, because you don't want heads that are at odds with the way the arms are moving. And you really have to have a lot of flexibility, going back and forth, trying different parts, different arms to see which ones fit and make for some pretty organic looking poses. I thought it would be cool to make a Raptor and a Warp Talon just to see what we could do with these bits. And I found it was particularly difficult to get the Warp Talon claws to look good on these bodies. They're in these really specific poses that seem to be paired to the jumping poses of the Raptor torsos, and many of them look a little bit unnatural in the running poses that the Mark 6 Marines are in. I opted to cut off some of the backpack prongs and use the Raptor backpacks on the Warp Talon, and also attempted to carve away the toes to add those sharp claws the Warp Talons have on their feet. Both of these will require a little bit of melee putting and puttying to just gap fill, but I'm going to get that done off camera. It's pretty basic, just gap filling some stuff. I want to move on to the more important stuff, which is picking parts and making cool conversions, but also explaining the choices I've made. I've got this one box of old Raptors, and I don't really want to buy new ones because I figure they'll probably get replaced sooner rather than later. And my thought here is I'm going to make 5 Warp Talons and 5 Raptors from the Mark 6 box, using the jump packs for the Warp Talons as well as the lightning claws, and then using the traditional Mark 6 jump packs for the Raptors, looking a little bit less corrupted and chaosy. This is going to be great because it means I'm going to be able to utilize most of that Raptor kit and that Warp Talon kit without it going to waste, and also gives a bit of purpose for the entire 10 Mark 6 Marines without them feeling like a mix and a match with different backpacks and things like that. It will also finally create a lot of really clear visual distinction between which ones are Warp Talons and which ones are Raptors. So I'm going to make up a bunch of different models, and then I'm going to pick my favorite one to paint on camera. No excuses here, just honesty. We make 2 videos a week, so to do an in-depth project, it makes a lot more sense for me to just paint an example model and do the rest at home for my army later. Otherwise, I'll be gunning to finish 10 Marines for a single video, and they're all just gonna look like trash. So I think it'll be better for you and better for me if I just paint one. So for the Raptors, I've decided to do a Sergeant, and that one will be using a plasma pistol and a accursed weapon for 40k. And this guy's also got a little bit of extra love in the form of a Horus Heresy Headhunter shoulder pad, just to mark him out as an Alpha Legion operative for my army. I also really like the addition in the Mark 6 Marine kit of empty bolt pistol holsters. This is one of the first times I've ever seen this bit, and I'm really excited to have it. I'm a WYSIWYG kind of guy, and I love to put all the war gear on my models, so being able to have an empty pistol holster is actually really exciting. It shouldn't be, but it's really exciting. And despite making a few Raptors, it's actually this one I think that's come together the best. So I really like this plasma pistol and axe Sergeant for my Raptor squad, so I think I'm going to be painting him up. I've shown off my paint job before. I did that quickfire one when I made Omegon, who's my new Terminator Lord for my Chaos Space Marines, but I'll briefly run through it here in the broad strokes to give you a bit of a vibe. I use dry brushing, mixing scale 75 paints, specifically black metal and cobalt metal, over a purple base coat. This dry brushing in a circular motion builds up a really nice metallic effect that isn't too strong, and as I find, fully metallic paint jobs can be a little bit distracting. This just gives that hint hint of sheen as the metallic flecks are laid out all over the model, I think builds up some cool gradients and looks really nice. These areas are actually highlighted and trimmed in Emerald Alchemy to give them that little bit of Alpha Legion teal pop. And overall, despite the look being quite eye-catching, it's probably one of the quickest parts of the whole paint job. To bring a bit of contrast in, I like to use brown washes on my trim, using Seraphim Sepia and then a little bit of Agrux Earthshade in the corners to do a gradient between silver and this sort of brown dirty silver. This effect also helps the silver trim on my Alpha Legion to look distinct from the mechanical silver parts, which are painted in Iron Warriors with a Null Oil wash. They just get a stipply highlight, but overall they're meant to look a bit more dark and grungy rather than the trim, which is supposed to look a little bit more fancy and catch the eye with those Stormhost Silver highlights. All of the little joints and ribs in the armor I paint black and highlight with some grays, and then the leather pouches on the model are also painted in some nice warm browns. These browns are also reflected in the metallics, as to break up some of the more mechanical areas I use decayed metal with a gold highlight and an Agrax Earthshade wash. This way I'm keeping my color range fairly close together. I'm not overly cluttering the model with all these different colors that distract, and instead, despite the bright metallic colors, it ends up being a pretty cohesive feeling paint job. For elements of flair though, there is some detailing in some Chaos emblems, such as the Alpha Legion icon on the shoulder of this Marine, which are painted in a green tinged gold. I really like this effect. It's a little bit different to some of the bright and regal golds you see on other models. I think it turns out really well. As for the energy effects, well, I opt for that venomous green to give hints to the serpentine nature of the Alpha Legion. And to do this for an army painting paint job, I always go back to my classic teachings for non-metallic metal, which is to just 4-quarter the weapon and kind of do a gradient down to dark and up to bright in each of the quarters, like a heraldic pattern. Then you just highlight the whole thing on the edges with a bright color, put in some white dots, and suddenly you have this pretty effective looking power weapon scheme. It's not going to win you any awards, but on a tabletop, it honestly looks great. So I encourage you to try these methods in any colors for your power weapons. For the plasma pistol, I of course need a plasma glow, which is always a pain. So much of a pain I didn't really do it on camera, but here's the end result. It looks okay. This is an area I feel pretty weak in and would like to get better. The final pop of color is the orange gems and eyes, and with that, the Raptor is done, and I can move on to the Warp Talon, arguably the more complicated model in this process. Wait, what's that? Murray has a word from our sponsor?
And now it's time to talk about Dave's favorite mobile game and the sponsor of this video, Warhammer Tacticus. Fully licensed by Games Workshop, Warhammer Tacticus is a fast-paced, free-to-play, turn-based strategy game where you can take control of over 60 iconic characters and champions from 15 playable factions, with the 16th just about to make their debut. That's right, the World Eaters are about to smash their way into the game with the champion Rask and his accompanying event launching this month. Join thousands of other players and a passionate community of Warhammer fans with this game and its stunning visuals to make it look like it came straight off the tabletop. Fight anywhere and anytime in multiple PvE campaigns, competitive PvP, and collaborative boss fights that escalate in difficulty, allowing your guild to always aim higher. With a focus on creating synergies of characters, their abilities, and then using the map and terrain to your advantage, you will quickly gain supremacy over your opponents. All this in a game you can play and then pop back into your pocket. So why not check out the game for yourself? The links are in the description below, so sign up now and start playing today.
Well, thank you, Murray, for that spot that you filmed after I went to America. So it's time to talk about my Warp Talon conversion, and this one I could have a little bit of fun with. The big conversion here was of course putting on the Warp Talon's backpack. This brutal jetpack with the little fins I actually always felt looked a bit overdone, but seeing it held up next to the Mark 6 kit, I actually think this feels almost meant to be. Because there's less detailing over the whole model, it makes the jetpack stand out as being a detailed accentuation rather than just more clutter. To make it work though, you do have to clip off a couple of the prongs in the back of the model, and I'll need to green stuff a few little points just to connect it a bit better to the torso. It's something that could easily be done across a squad, but there are a few gaps left and it definitely isn't a seamless connection. The Warp Talon arms are kind of oversized, with the lightning claws being based on power fists, which meant, if I'm honest, I actually think they work a lot better on these huge Mark 6 bodies over the original Raptor bodies they were sold with. In fact, in general, the raptor bodies have this awkward leaping off rocks vibe. It really accentuates how narrow a Space Marine's waist is compared to the rest of their model because they're not hiding it behind a bolter. And I've always thought this part of the raptor kit kind of looked a little bit weird. So having these brutal running assault marines feet on the ground is a really cool way to approach it, and I'm excited to see how it turns out. The same goes for the feet. Warp Talons have these big claws on their feet, and I had to carve them off and glue them onto the feet of this model because the Warp Talon's toes kind of glue into the foot. There's like a slot there, whereas the Mark 6 kit doesn't have that, and because the Mark 6 kit's feet are planted on the ground, I actually had to position the claws in a way where they could work, whereas the Raptor kit doesn't have that problem. However, I do like the way it balances out and makes the feet of the model look aggressive, so I was happy to do it and keep it there. The last bits of plastic I needed to glue on were a couple of detailed accentuations. Warp Talons don't have any war gear, so I couldn't add holsters, grenades, or pouches around their waist, so instead I looked to another kit, the Cruel Boy Aurochs kit, to find me some gubbins. Orcs love gubbins, and trophies and skulls and bags of miscellaneous organs were perfect, and I placed them on these hips as trophies this Warp Talon's been collecting, and I think it adds just that right bit of weight to the waist, but also a bit of flair of chaos. This guy feels like he might have been a Night Lord before he signed up with my Alpha Legion. With the plastic pieces done, I could move on to converting and doing a little bit of green stuff. And I must admit, as I mentioned, my holiday was on the horizon and I didn't have a huge amount of time, so I kind of had one shot at this, and well, this sucked. It really sucked. It was probably a low point in the last few months of my hobby. I felt miserable. I felt terrible. I was so angry that I couldn't get it right. I don't know if the green stuff was just old, my mix was old, or if I'm just a talentless hack. But either way, it was not pretty. I was really negative on it and really down on it, and I couldn't fix it because I'd used super glue to adhere the green stuff to the model so I could sculpt it in a short space of time, and I was kind of stuck there. But look, Murray gave me a pep talk and told me to work through it and that it would be fine, and I was being too hard on myself. And I kind of took a breath, slept on it, and came back, and it was done. And you know what? It looks okay. It looks like rough, beaten metal from a Chaos Marine. It's fine. So the benefit of hindsight is really good, but it's one of those rare moments where you sort of challenge yourself and you have to kind of accept the quality you produce and hope to do better next time rather than beat yourself up and give up. So yeah, it was sucky, but I think in the end, it's pretty decent. Doing Chaos trim with green stuff is really hard, so I commend anyone who can do that. So with all that done, I can move on to the paint job of the Warp Talon, which is going to be pretty similar to the Raptor. So the Warp Talon continues along much the same line that the Raptor did, starting off with the base coat of all of the nice metallic coats, and then...
Hey Dave, did you finish painting that Warp Talon?
Can't remember. I'm on holiday. A big thank you to all of our patrons for helping us create these videos. You are all amazing. Without your support, there is no way that we could do this for a job, and without your support, there is no way we could even consider going to Adepticon to meet all the other amazing creators in the space that we haven't yet had the privilege to meet because we live on the bottom of the world. So thank you so much to our patrons. Please do join up, chuck a message in our Discords, hang out, join our mini review, and join the Tabletop Time family. It's been a pleasure getting to know you all. I hope to see some of you in Adepticon.
Thanks to everyone for watching this video. I'd been really excited to do these conversions for a long time, and I had a lot of fun finally doing them. What do you think, Jen?
Wow, Dave, these guys look awesome. You did a great job.
Gee, I'm sure glad we decided to film an outro for this video before going 15,000 kilometers around the globe to America so that our editor doesn't have to shamble together some semblance of an outro. See you next time!